All right, team, we're nearly there. 2 more lectures, and then tomorrow, next week at 7:30 a.m. I think I have the right date now. Right. So back here again, an hour earlier, and then, yeah. And so the instructions are up. Here's the plan. There's stuff down here. So there's when you should hand in your final report. So that's on the Wednesday by the end of the day, basically. So read through that. If you have questions, you should ask me. I'll make the order the same as last time. Okay? Right. So come talk to me about that if you have issues. But that is next Tuesday. Right, so we have things to get through to finish this course triumphantly. So I'm going to talk about a couple more pieces. So this is going to be about voting and fame, how things take off. I'll go back to stories. I have this summary piece, you can see the titles up there, of contagious stories, which ties a lot of things together. It's a big thesis of sorts, and if I wanted to, I'd write a book about it. Anyway, but, oh, I am. Oh, and then we'll finish with complexification. Why do things complexify? And this should be a tiny piece of what is an enormous topic. All right, so this isn't too long. I'll go through it, okay. So the problem of superstars. Why do we have this incredible fame for individuals? And also then, so maybe you start to figure that out, but then why is it so unpredictable, right? Although sometimes we claim that it all makes sense, right? So we're going to explore that a little bit. And then, as I said, I'll have this kind of summary, nutshell kind of thing in the contagious stories piece. All right, so it's the mechanics of fame, right? So the Mona Lisa is famous for being famous, like Kim Kardashian. It is the Kim Kardashian of paintings, of Justin Bieber's. Okay, so it's pretty bad. So there's been some thinking in the past. This is from Rosen, and these are reasonable kind of toy model versions, very simple, things that can be just done analytically. This is going back to the early 80s. Had 3 examples in this paper, so this is an economist, right? Yeah. And so full-time comedians, and why are we looking at these? Soloists in classical music, and economic textbooks, right? Of course, they have to talk about themselves. So, and I don't mean economists, it's just academics. They have to start talking about themselves, which is a huge failing. Anyway, so the point is these are people who are making money out of these careers. And there aren't many, right, at this time, and it's still true. It's hard to be... it's hard to make a lot of money as an author, right? It's hard to sell short stories and then, medium-sized stories and all these sorts of things. It's hard to get any traction. But if you do and you take off and you're J.K. Rowling and you actually exist, then you have billions of dollars, right? You have an incredible amount of money. So you not just sort of survive, you flourish completely, right? And of course, we have this idea of winner takes all and so on in some markets. Right. So what's the plan with this one? Highly skewed distribution story, trying to figure that out. And so this is a simple kind of idea, very economics kind of approach to it, right? So there's some reward to quality. You have some. So this is a tricky thing. There's some intrinsic quality to people, right? So this is, or whatever your talent is that you're interested in, and you get some reward for that. It just maps to it. The world does the right thing. And that it's convex, though, that it goes, it simply has this second derivative that's positive. And so why is that? So why is it not just linear, right? If you're twice as good as someone else, why, maybe you should get twice as much money. But in fact, you can get millions of times more, or tens of millions. Well, they get 0 and you get everything. So one is imperfect substitution. So, if you have twice as good a surgeon, it's better than 2 surgeons who are, right? If you don't just double the surgeons, you would rather have a surgeon who was, twice as good, right? Not just 2 more of the same one. 2 more dentists, right? Okay. Just I want 5 of those dentists instead of, so that doesn't work, right? Okay, so you don't want this, and then technology. So this is clearly the big piece now that's enabled this at the global scale. So you can reproduce yourself, but this started with books, right? And then really, as you go back, it started with stories being replicated and being attached to an individual. Aristotle said this, or God said this. So then you have this ability to consume all of these things, right? So there's a joint consumption, right? It's not being, you can all buy that same. Now it's absurd, right? You can, whatever, you pay a subscription to Apple or something for music. after a lot of fighting and starting with Napster. But you can all experience it, right? You don't have to try and fit into the same hall to listen to this opera singer, which used to be the case, who could only sing now and then and had to have a rest. And, very different. You can listen to it in the shower, in the car, whatever. You can have, So music works well like that, but of course books have gotten to that point, now with things like electronic books and Kindle and so on, which has made it hard sometimes. We've had a lot of debates on like, why are we paying anything for these things? Because, So you need people to switch their minds to, and maybe you don't want to do this because you're young, but paying for creativity, right? Paying for people for creating things, actually making things. So there's no social element in this, right? This is just simply the world is good, like it works, there's a good system, people figure out quality and it gets revealed as people go through their lives and it all gets sorted out. It's just that these two things conspire to make it really take off. So that's definitely a component, right? Then this is around the same time, and it's the sort of opposite piece, and it's there's no measure of inherent quality, but this is really about why do people enjoy the same music? Well, there's of course some intrinsic thing which is hard to measure, but there's a lot in the social piece, right? So it's just acknowledging that we're building a culture around something, and so this is then a sort of another dimension to go in. Everything's of the same quality. What happens if that's true? Then you'll still get inequality in success because people will cohere around certain things, just because of the social phenomena of humans, right? So the coordination piece ends up with differential success. All right, so these are both reasonable pieces. The question is, how much is this at acting? And it depends on the field you're in. So you might think, for example, sports, lots of testing, tons of testing, people against each other. There's also, what I mean is, they're playing and playing and playing, and can they jump? Can they do these things? Whatever it is, fundamental sort of athletic things. You have to throw a thing, whatever it is. Team sports, you're playing and playing and playing. So, and as we kind of know, right? We know. So, for example, like baseball, which absurdly has 162 games a year, that tests a team well, and so in fact, the best team in some sense is a very good team. But then you get to the playoffs, and there's a lot more randomness because the chance of winning a 60-40, it's not great. So, you want playoffs, I think, where it would get to a reasonable outcome of like 101 games or something like that, but it's long enough. Anyway, but sport, you think, well, it would do pretty well. But even there, there's a lot of randomness and there's a lot of psychological stuff. But as you get further and further out into cultural products, especially, say, art, which sort of, ironically, I suppose, famously also has this sense around it that, modern art, why is that, I could do that, my dog could do that, my elephant did do that. That's why it's famous. Okay, so that's a meme. Right, so this is a purely social construction story, right? So how can we measure this inherent quality thing? There's evidence from various things as to how sequential behavior works, and of course we had this experiment, we'll come back to it. So easy decisions, this is an older paper, I'm not sure how well this will hold up, but easy decisions, this was sort of voting yes or no, and this is the kind of thing you get, say, for maybe YouTube, up or down sort of stuff. Bandwagoning is easy there. If you have to actually put something up, and Amazon's kind of broken, I think, increasingly with fake reviews, but it used to be, people were pretty faithful, and it takes some time to write a review. There's a minimum amount. You'd see that sometimes saying, I'm just writing this last sentence to reach the minimum amount. The people tended to kind of want to come in and go against some early stuff that was opposite to what they thought, right? So if there's been 100 good reviews and you think it's terrible, you're motivated to really say something bad about it. Okay, so self-selection is a problem there. I'm just going to point to some other kind of voting things because, this is all the story we're in here, right? How do things take off? It's because people are sort of voting in some way. And so there are lots of voting systems that can possibly go wrong. This is a paper from now 10 years ago, but it's somewhat mathematical, but it's a very interesting kind of claim, and I think reasonable one, which is that if you have individual assessment, so where you give things scores, right, and you're not really following anyone else, like out of stars or whatever it is. Wine was the example here, so that's rating 0 to 100. Skating in the Olympics, all of these things have been corrupted, of course, as well. We know about that. But the idea that you give individual assessments, so imagine voting in the election and you have Clinton and Trump, and you can give them 1 to 5 stars, right? Instead of this one or this one, you can actually just say, this is how much I like this one and how much I like this one. Of course, a lot of people will be like 5 and 1 and 1 and 5, but it could be the case in some examples where you'd be happy with everyone or these 3 people. So you'd be able to impart more information. You'd be able to send more information instead of just this one thing. So that's what this is about, and it shows you don't get voting paradox, with Arrow's paradox, which is that you can end up with, in ranking systems, where you say, I prefer A to B to C, you can end up with situations where A is preferred to B, is preferred to C, is preferred to A. It's possible. You can get people voting in. So rank voting is very popular in Australia. It was here in Burlington. It was referred to as Australian, whatever. And this is 10 years ago. It got voted out. The one in Maine is in trouble because usually what happens eventually is someone who was who was winning in that first thing, but they had maybe 25% of the vote, they lose because they really only had 25% of the vote and no one else wants them, right? They're not a second choice for anyone else. They're the last choice for everyone else. So those ranked things often in peril because they're slightly too complicated and someone gets upset. Anyway, that's all to say that maybe vote in this way rather than preferential voting, rank voting. This is a nice bit of work. Again, it's sort of a toy model thing. So imagine we actually have objects and they have some quality Q, just some distribution of it, some random variable. And then people start to vote. And in this case, they are comparing them. This is just the way this was set up. They're comparing them. The way you choose an object, right, because you're only allowed to look at a few now and then, sequentially, you're sort of a limited agent. The probability you choose something is proportional to how many votes it already has to some power, and then you could also make it proportional, again, to the votes to some power that it already has times its inherent quality. And this is very much a rich get richer kind of story. Again, you'll remember this kind of this exponent story there. So alpha is less than 1, then this is kind of rolling over, right? So it's sublinear, it's rolling over with the number of votes that something's already had. Then you uncover the underlying quality, right? You're good assessors of quality. This means that someone who gets votes early on, right? You start listening to them on the radio or whatever it is, like they're there, they get put in front of you. As long as you're allowed to sort through the other pieces, like that you get to be able to choose from them, then in a way that's not too strong, then people collectively will be able to sort out the underlying ordering of these objects, right? But if there's some takeoff, you got some early votes, and you get right that. So this is like a top 10 story, right? You get early votes, you get presented to people more, depending on that system, how strong that system is. Then it can be that you never sort things out. So this is a really an excellent result, and so this is the opposite version, right? So again, how you present things to people matters tremendously, as you might imagine, but these are some sort of dives into how it works. Now we get to some experiments. So this is an experiment with zebrafish or zebrafish, and kind of a crazy thing to do. Obviously, involving lots of graduate students getting bitten by fish, but this was the idea. So you put 4 fish in a tank, and then you do that again and again, and they're all about the same size. So someone's measuring fish size, and you sit there as a graduate student and watch which fishes nip each other. Right, so that's the way we assess dominance for zebrafish. Who chases whom around, and so it's not good. It's a bullying system, and the fish were never given any. Well, this is what happened to them. They're allowed to. So they set them up, and this is the first hierarchy, for example. So A is above B, is above C, is above D, right? And then you take them all apart, give them some time out, put them in their own bowls for a while. Fish forget, we think, right? They're also delicious. So They might not forgive us for that. But anyway, dolphins, not a fish. So you put them back in, same fish, put them back in, you give them some time away. You can do this with chickens as well. Chickens are really not smart. And you put them back together and see what happens, right? And so this is the results from this paper. So there are 6 cases, I think, out of, how many are there total? Do I have it on the previous thing? There are 22 bowls of fish. So 6 of them came back, and the fish sorted themselves out into the same hierarchy. Here's one where these two changed, right? The gamma and delta fish changed. Here's A, thinks that, the champ there, right? They're the whatever, king of the prom or something, and here the nerdster, if we use the stereotypes from 1980s movies, which we should not. Okay, so, and here's a situation where we have this weird thing where C1 is beating up C2, beats up C3, and C3 steals C1's lunch, right? And then that went out to something like this. So there are a lot more complicated things. Overall story, though, is 3/4 of the time the hierarchy changes. Same fish. So this is a suggestion of, you run the system again, right? Now, of course, you want to start doing this with people, which is evil and bad. It's bad enough as it is here. So how do you do that? If you run high school again, which you shouldn't for anyone, but if you run it again, what happens? These are different pieces. Okay, so we run an experiment, and we're very much, some of that stuff comes after what we did, so I'm sort of tying it together. Obviously not the economics things. This is back in 2005 and 6, and it's become a well-cited thing. I guess the social psych literature one day has to come for it, but it's been holding up. There's about 100,000 people. I guess we had 30,000. About 100,000 people looked at it, but we had about 30,000 people involved. So you saw this to start with. It's a music experiment. This is also pre-Facebook and Twitter. You've got to think about that. Like email was the cool thing. Message apps. AOL was dead, I suppose, so at least we had that. But yeah. Okay, so you saw this thing, you click on the start, and you get presented with a set of songs to listen to, right? And you get these little things, you just click on it, and a little player would come up, which at that time was a cool thing on a website. There were 48 songs, and the idea was, so Matt Salganic was our student, who's now at Princeton in sociology. He worked on this. This was main. Well, he did a couple of big things for his thesis, but this was the main thing for his PhD, I should say. And so he recruited 48 bands from not a very well-known kind of MP3 website at the time. I mean, it was okay, but it was like garage band kind of things, right? You could upload your stuff and put your name up, make a little page. MySpace was off being kind of a big thing like that, but this was a smaller version. So these are all unknown. No one's paying them money. And invited them to be part of it, and we invited more, and we ended up with 48. And so the question we're trying to run here is how probable is the world if we run it again, right? We do this fish-like experiment. And can we estimate the variability of the world? Like how uncertain are things? So, and as I said, superstars dominate in our real world, but they're unpredictable. And so why is that? So here's the first setup. Great band, Hydraulic Sandwich, Separation Anxiety was the song. Really good. Anyway, so that song is Eye Patch. So, they're okay, right? But they're totally garage bands, like literally, yeah. Silver Fox and Gnaw. Anyway, so you were shown this layout. So there are 16, 16, 16, and you could kind of look around. This shows you the number of downloads here. As you can see, it's kind of, and this is very much pre-phones, so people are going to be looking at this on screens. I mean, that was where everyone would be. So you could see this, but if you look, you kind of have to kind of work through this to see who's been downloaded the most, right? And if you want to find the fourth most downloaded one, that would be a little hard. But every person got their own random version of this layout, and we let them stay on it for as long as they wanted. They could come back, but we only took data from a certain amount of time. All right, so what's going on? So as they come in, they're put into 9 buckets, right? So one bucket, you don't see any other downloads, right? You just don't see what anyone else has done before you. So all of those people are acting independently, right? They can just listen to something, and then if they download it, that's the key thing. If they listen to it, there was a little rating thing, that's all fine, but if they downloaded it, that was the kind of the invitation here, I suppose, was that you could get free music, then that's what we counted, right? So there's one independent world, so that's how we're going to try to assess quality. We just get all of these opinions from people and just aggregate them. Now, there are 8 parallel worlds where you come in, you're the first one, there are zeros everywhere, you listen to something, you download it, it turns into a 1, next person comes in, and so on, so on, so on, right? So that starts to build in its own way, and there are 8 of those running in parallel. So if we're really good at sorting things out, right, then the best song that matched up with that independent world would take off, right? It would win, yeah. And the ordering would be all sorted out. So this was in Science in 2006. So the first experiment was like that. Experiments 2 through 4, we actually changed it to a straight up 1 to 48, and it's based on download number, right? So made it easy for people to see. So what's happening is you go from here to here. So no one knows anyone, right? You know usernames. There's no sense of who these other people are. It's just other people did this. You can't see them. There's nothing like that. So this is a very weak change in, or very simple change in the social signal, right? It just makes it easier to see what other people have done. So if you like, from here to here, we're just making a little switch and making the social signal clearer and stronger. This is what other people like, and this is what they really don't like. If you look at what people click on, they tend to sort of click on the corners a little bit. They click on the top one here for sure, right? But they also click on the bottom one, like above average, right? So there may be some random clicking in here, but they'll definitely click on this one, and they'll click on the bottom one to see what kind of world we're in here, right? What's the scope of this terrible place, right? Which I want to leave as quickly as possible. Okay, so this shows you variability in final rank. And so experiment 1, experiment 2, and I'll come to the 3 and 4 in a little bit. But experiment 1 is you're given this random layout. It's different for every person. Experiment 2, you're given this top 48, just ordered by downloads. So, little funny plots to understand to start with. This is the most downloaded song. This is the least downloaded song in the independent world, right? These are people acting independently. And so for each one of these, there are 8 worlds, and each point has 8 worlds above it, right? And it's the rank for each one of those, right? So the most downloaded song in the independent world actually did pretty well in all of these worlds where everyone else is following. And this is a hard thing we don't want to quantify, but it wasn't terrible, right? It wasn't terrible. And there were some songs down here that were really not good, right? They were just, yeah. So, and that seems to be genuinely sort of sorted out by both the independent people and then everyone following each other, right? People did not like this. But in here, there's a huge range, right? So there's and I think it's over here, there's a song that was number 1 in one world and 40th in another, right? So there's a lot of variability. And, we weren't controlling that initial quality. You could do another experiment where you somehow try to get things that people were really found hard to distinguish. But we just sort of threw up these songs. So there is some underlying variation in quality for sure. And again, it has to be measured against some group of people to get that estimate. There's no, you don't dig into a song and pull out its quality, right? It's not something like that. It's based on how people experience it in a time, certain culture. So what I'll try to show is that as you go from here to here, the variability goes up. So let's get that. And there are a couple of pieces here. One is, so this is a Gini coefficient, which I guess I've only sort of obliquely talked about, but it's an inequality measure. Here's the independent world. This is experiment 1, where you've got the matrix. So in all of the parallel worlds where people are following each other, it's more unequal, right? So there's the winner got more and more downloads than, it's more spread out in terms of the download distribution. That's true again in this experiment, but the inequality has gone up, right, for all of those. And I think every individual world has a higher inequality than every individual world here. So we turned up the social signal, made it easier to see what other people did. People follow each other more. Fair enough, right? But here's the next piece on top of that so that should make sense. But then here's the part that makes it problematic, is that this is a measure of unpredictability, so it's a measure of shuffling, right? You could do this in various ways, but how how ordered are how well do the orders of downloads, number of downloads match up between worlds? Right? You can compare every pair. We have 8 shoes, 2 pairs. So the unpredictability went up, right? So it's more skewed and more unpredictable. That's the issue. It's not just that the success is taken off, which makes sense because people are following each other. People following each other makes it less uncertain what's going to happen. The world is less certain. So these are to summarize that, right? So we've got a stronger social signal, greater following, greater inequality. And then, so that makes sense. We have more unpredictability, though. This is the piece that's unsettling. And when you see a phenomenon like Harry Potter or Mona Lisa, the people do not talk about. They rarely talk about this, and they will not talk about this, right? It's due to its intrinsic qualities, right? It's because of the magnificent plots and the words and the da-da-da, and you know, I love it for what it is by purely of my own, interaction with it, not because it was a thing that everyone else liked. And then, so then you have this piece, you can kind of go back the other way. So if you have really skewed distributions, you would think that would suggest you have really, this big skew in quality. The Harry Potter really is fantastically good, and the Mona Lisa is amazingly good, right? And I will say, like when I first would read about the Mona Lisa as a kid, like everything I read about it was always about the way their eyes follow you around the room and all these sorts of details about the painting technique and so on. It was all intrinsic qualities. But this success it suggests it's social. So this is the thing to take away from it, right? When you see these big skewed distributions in cultural success, people are following each other. I mean, I know that's sort of a leap to say it that way as well, but it's really suggests that's what's going on. And if you ran the world again, it would be different. It really would be different, right? So even though, Harry Potter is gigantically successful, you run it again, not. And I've alluded to this in the stuff we've had before, in the Contagion piece, for example, whatever it was, like 14 publishers passed up J.K. Rowling's book, and then first book, and then the plan for the whole thing. It was a grandkid, right, of a CEO who said, this is fun. Okay, so we tell stories for it, right? We'll come back to that. All right, so there was we kept going. We ran this third experiment where we're doing basically the second experiment. Again, we're kind of running things along, and then did this manipulation at the end. So this is a little slightly bad behavior. So people didn't know they were in parallel worlds. That's kind of okay, right? That we didn't do anything like that. This one is the manipulation thing, which the psychologist, you got to have it. It's pretty funny. It's like everything had, you got to do it. Where's the deception? Yeah.
How do you know it works?
Were people deceived? Yes. Okay. So what we did was we ran a number of these parallel worlds, let them run along, and then took one of them and make copies of it, right? You can just do this. You just make copies of these worlds and then stop. So we're going to make 3 copies of, we're going to have the original one and then 2 more copies of the world. We just set them up, and now people coming in are going to go to this world or this world or this world with a third probability, right? So there are 2 duplicates over here. But those duplicates, we flip the download number up and upside down, okay? Basic thing. We thought about other things like randomization, but this is the best thing. And so that's what's happening here. So here's song 1 and song 48's number of downloads as a function of number of people who have come into it. This is this one experiment. Now we make 2 duplicates, and the orders are flipped. And so here's the original experiment traveling along. This is the top song. It's doing well, right? It kept going. You can sort of see it's still basically getting the same number of downloads. This isn't a system that's hasn't got a super rich get richer thing in it, right? So, I mean, you could do something where the first song is the only song that the first song that's downloaded, no one else sees any other songs after that, right? You could just do that. You could make a system like that. And then, of course, that would be the one that takes off. But this is not something that really has a giant rich get richer phenomenon. That's fine. Anyway, so it's linearly growing like this. Here's song 48 just puttering along. It's pretty terrible, right? If you looked at this, you'd think this is not good. So now we have this song is now being, we're pretending to people, we're marketing to people that it's the best song in the world. So it starts to actually get downloads, right? So more than its rate here, but not like song one, this one that had been sorted out. So even though we know there's this imperfect, very imperfect sorting that's going on here, the extremes were somewhat extreme. And even then so we know that people aren't going to sort things out perfectly. But if we then manipulate it, we see that actually, this thing takes off. But again, the overall downloads share is not working out, right? So the whole system is not performing as well. So Song 48's boosters, they're very happy, right? Because now they're making money out of it. They've manipulated humans. This is what you want to do in advertising and so on, and politics and all these things. So they think they're terrific, right? Molos should talk to them. And then they've messed with the system by their act in a way that makes the whole system not function as well, right? Song 1 is just from this distribution of songs. It's being dug out, right? It was, if we look back at our original thing, there was this one song that people really unfailingly seemed to like. Yeah. Will they eventually switch back? So, okay, well, let's look at this one. Here's where song 2 was going. It keeps going up, right, after this creation of these two new ones. Song 47 is now in its place. It's getting downloads, and it looks like linearly it'll just keep going, But song 2 has become song 47. Sorry, this is song 47. Song 2 has become song 47. It's doing a little bit better than the original song 47, but it's not digging its way out, right? This is never going to... these are almost, they've got the same thing. So we know, first of all, that the ordering doesn't get sorted out. You're right, there's no one ordering from the parallel worlds. And then this is to show that, as you move away from these extreme ones, like that did well or were terrible, then these ones are, yeah. So this whole system is bad. And so the inversion, it's a pretend rich get richer, but at a slower rate, right? The overall number of downloads for this system, this is a terrible thing, but has dropped. So fine, manipulate the thing, make money, be bad, and then people don't trust you, which is true. Okay, does that?
Yeah, I was thinking like song 1 on the left.
That one looks like it will dig its way out. Yeah, yeah.
Like if people generally do think that that's a better song, like will it fix itself?
So if you have, so you can imagine dialing and this is a tricky thing to do, but you'd have to run a test on a population to start with independently, where they're acting independently, and you want that same population to sort of be coming in, the same kinds of people that you're, gathering online, right? So you need to have some kind of, right, could be Mechanical Turk or something like that, so that you get from maybe 1,000 songs, you get 100 songs that are really close in quality that people can't sort out. And then if you ran this sort of thing, they'd all be like this, right? You wouldn't be able to dig them out. But if you also did something where you got 99 songs that were kind of like this, and then one song that was, people really loved it in the independent world, then this would happen again as well. Yeah.
In experiment 3 and 4, were
Yep.
the play counts updated? So I know that you flipped them so that
Yeah.
song 48 had the most plays.
Yeah. So what we showed them, all you could see was number of downloads.
But so as time went on and more people saw,
Yeah.
the list of songs, could you see number 41 rising? Number 1 that is number 41. Could
Yeah.
you see its increase in popularity?
Yeah. So that's what this is doing here, I think, right? So this is song 1. Song 1 becomes song 48. Right, so here's the original song 48 in the solid line. Here's the original song 1, and these are the faked ones for the 2 experiments. So song 1 is getting more and more. This is the number of downloads over time.
The listeners see that.
They will see. So they'll see the list. Yeah. They always. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they always see the list. Yeah, they always see the list. Yeah, so they have to work because now it's not at the bottom, which is an easy thing to go to if that's what you're right.
So they have to go through it.
Yeah.
Find it.
Yeah. Todd had a quick one. Yep.
Yeah,
And then we'll give you.
it's interesting the difference between song 1 and song 2, and you're mentioning that people look at the top of the list, or listen at the top and listen at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's probably a really big difference between 48 and 47 in terms of how many people listen.
Right, but the problem is once 48 starts getting off the bottom, they still have to find it, right? So 48 gets a chance to be listened to immediately. Not as much. People obviously listen to the number one, right? And there's some, yeah. But once 48 gets a few downloads, now it's 47, now it's 46. So people have to go and find it there. So it gets a little bit of benefit right at the start because it's the worst and people want to see it. But then it starts to get buried in the, just the tail. So it's a little harder to find. Yeah, so it's weird. You want to be at some point on a list that's, for some reason, people will look at. So being number 10 versus 11 is huge, right, for a lot of top 10 lists. So number 10 is a big deal. People will really fight to just get over that threshold. It's like why bronze is better than silver. Because, no medal is a disaster. Silver, you're like, why didn't I win gold? Yeah. So it's true. Yeah. Owen, you had it.
Yeah, so there was this time, I think in all Latin America, where terrible songs were very popular. So
Yeah.
I think it was because you like them because they're fun, because they're bad. So I wonder what would happen if you could take like the switch between each of those, like from 48 to the second, what happens there? What's the flip in there?
Yeah, I think, you could do it all again. We got to reproduce it, right? So we should do it before someone else does.
Do you think this would also extend to people who are like professional musicians?
In what they like around them.
The same.
I mean, people follow enormously, right? So whole genres start up because. Now, well, I mean, we have to, it's not that. I mean, certainly when some new genres come along, it's hard for a lot of people to understand them, right? I mean, they can be really tough, it just doesn't fit on anything they have. So there can be a lot of resistance, So, yeah. You want to ask about this? Yep, it's good.
So would a rating system, would it be more fair if a person saw a list that kind of reflected their past listening habits?
Their own?
On an individual basis?
Yeah, I mean, so, all right, so, we're in this world of algorithms now, and they're all doing something complicated based on this, and we've talked a lot about rich get richer, things will win for not great reasons. This adds to that. I mean, I think if you have any kind of voting thing, you want to do it independently. It's very simple. You want to do it independently. We have department meetings where, the chair will say, okay, let's all vote. It's like, sometimes it's kind of controversial. So you'll see people sometimes do this. There'll be objections, could we do this privately? And anything where business, retreat things, they love to do this where here are all the options. Take a little sticker and put you're given 12 stickers. Put your stickers where you want to vote for them. So of course it's a first mover advantage kind of thing. You see, and people respond to this one's got all these votes and then someone, there's all sorts of psychology involved. But you're not acting independently and it leads to, I mean, we've had all these things in the past, groupthink, all, people are, so you just got to stop, you got to stop that. I mean, I think we're at an interesting point in time, well, very, in terms of, may you live in interesting times, but with the correlations of the way people think across the globe, right? So, Fox is beamed into rural Australia. You can watch it. You kind of been watching it for 20 years, 30 years, Rupert Murdoch. So there are correlations in what people are consuming that are just, extraordinary now. I mean, compared to, when the US started, for example, which let's say 1776, right? It took 30 days, I think, to get information across the whole continent, involving a horse. And then Pony Express cut it in half, and that was a big deal, right? So now you can watch the video straight away, right? If there's something. So the correlations in the way people think and talk is transcending the, where we were.